Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for coming back. We've got a whole day ahead of us, and that last session was really wonderful. And this is a panel that we've got for an hour with 4 wonderful guests, and I'll go through their bios just so you have a bit of information about each of our guest speakers today. So next to me we have Josh Eggington, aka Flewnt. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Josh is a proud Noongar Wangi rapper from Borlu, or Perth, with a strong family legacy rooted in activism. Flewnt uses hip-hop as his platform to articulate a powerful, positive and uplifting message for his people. Bursting onto the scene with his breakthrough single Kaya Kayana, which was Wham's Song of the Year in 2018. And it's a roaring Noongar anthem and tribute to the strong history of his family, culture and people. Kaya Kayana is a nod to the past while striving and thriving towards a better future. Welcome and thank you for joining us. Okay, and next to Flewnt we have Adrian Dzvuke. Adrian's quickly become one of Australia's most in-demand emerging artists, as shown by performances at Splendour in the Grass, Groove in the Moo and Wave Rock festivals, as well as support slots for Spacey Jane, O'Malley, Pond, San Cisco, Stella Donnelly and Winston Surfshirt. Equally at home on stage with his band or in the studio, his soulful mixture of Afrobeats, R&B and pop has been gaining fans at every show and with every release. Thank you for joining us as well. Then we have Elise Reitze-Swensen. Who is a multi-instrumentalist, composer, music producer and educator. Elise's compositional excellence has been recognised through a variety of industry awards, such as West Australian Music or WAM, Best Electronic Producer in 2017, 18 and 19, and Song of the Year in 17, 18 and 19. Woo! In addition, Elise has been a finalist for the Music Network's 30 Under 30 Innovators Award, National Live Music's Industry Achievement Award and APRA's Professional Development Award, and Australian Women in Music's Studio Production Award. Congratulations and thank you.
Oh, it's amazing.
And then we have Helen Shanahan. Helen is a folk singer-songwriter from Perth, Western Australia. Helen's songs ride the joys and sorrows of love and life and draw the listener into an articulate and heartfelt world of story, melody and guitar through her eyes. Helen graduated from the West Australian Academy of Performing Arts, or WAPA, majoring in voice. In 2013, she won the Songwriting Award in the national competition Telstra Road to Discovery. Thank you for joining us, Helen. What an amazing panel we have. Thank you for joining us today. To kick things off, just a quick question about how long you've actually been writing, because some of you may have started when you're really young. It might be newer for some of you. So just down the line, how long you've actually been writing?
Yeah, I guess I remember sort of first writing like when I was about 12, started writing sort of, I don't know, because I'm in hip-hop, I was kind of writing all this stuff that I thought was gangster at the time, and I was just like thinking I was cool. But I didn't start writing the music now that I make until I realized as I got older that like kind of felt as though I had a cultural obligation to my people, and I realized music and words really sort of amplified that voice and those stories that I wanted to put out into the world. So I think when I was about 15, I started writing sort of more conscious and speaking sort of about the world and how I perceived it and how my people did as well. Like it says in my bio, I come from a very, very strong political family. I've always fought for Noongar people and First Nations people across this country, our rights, and I kind of always had that rooted in me, and because I had that sort of ability to be able to rhyme and put it into words, I just felt like that was sort of my calling, and that's when I just started writing really hard all the time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Adrian?
I don't know. Oh, this is actually on. I thought it was off the whole time. Okay, cool. Well, like I started in church, really. My parents used to force me to go to church every Sunday. And my dad was like big in the band and everything. He was like the band leader, and he was like, you got to come through and be part of it. So I just went every week for practice. And one day the drummer wasn't there, and then I played drums, and it was horrible. But then I had like this natural kind of rhythm for that kind of thing. So I just kind of started practicing and learning on YouTube, started producing, and I guess properly writing music since like 17. And then, yeah, just took it seriously. Like 2018, I was like, actually want to start properly trying to actually proper do it. And yeah, just kind of found my sound in that. And then just like Flewnt said, I also realized that I have this Afro-Australian voice that is a new concept in Australia at the moment. I don't think, if you guys know like Genesis Owusu, Sampa the Great, all these names are very, I guess, like new in the Australian music climate, and I felt like I related to that in a way that I could bring an Afro flavor to the Australian industry, and I feel like that's something that has become a big part of me. So yeah, I think since 17, to answer the question. Yeah. Yeah.
So I actually came from writing in a bit of a classical background, and then kind of, went into contemporary from there. And I think when I was about 15, I did an after-school program at WAPA, which was for percussionists. It was really nerdy. Anyway, the first piece that I wrote was for, I think it was tap dancing and cajon. So it was like, nothing like what I do now, which is mostly with technology. But yeah, so that was probably around 15. And then I started working with technology and using like DAW software when I was probably about 18. So probably been writing for about like the last 10 years, and also encouraging women and non-binary people around me to get on board and start writing as well and producing. Yeah.
Well, I started when I was in high school, and a lot of it was just from my journal, because I started writing in one from a very young age because I had trouble sleeping when I was in about year 6, and my mum was like, oh no, what's wrong? We got to take her to see someone. And they said, oh, just start, putting all your thoughts in a diary. And it was basically like, oh my gosh, school sucks. So I don't know. But then I just started also learning the guitar, and then it was just natural for those words in the journal to go into songwriting. But I didn't really show anyone these songs because I was quite an anxious teen and adult. But yeah, I didn't actually, I just kept writing for my own self, but it wasn't till I was kind of in my 20s that I started performing them for people. But yeah, so I was quite young when I started the lyric writing, I suppose, not that it was anything poetic really.
Awesome, thank you. If we can talk about your writing process, because it would be quite different, the styles on this stage are very different. So I'd love to hear about how you actually write your songs. What's the process? Is it start with the lyrics or the music, and how you actually form your songs? And we don't have to go down the line every time, so if someone wants to jump in, please feel free. But yeah, your process. Feel free, Flewnt.
Well, okay. Well, for me, I'm very big on melody, so I could be doing something during the day and I'll just have a melody in my head and I have to record it, like voice note. Like whatever it is, I just get my phone out, I'm like, whatever it is. And if that's something that sticks with me, if I like record it and I forget about it, I don't go back to it. But if I record it and if I get home and I'm still like singing that, then I get home and kind of maybe get some chords on top of that, or like figure out like a groove and then go from there. I literally will make a whole instrumental, just like mumble on top of the whole thing, and then pick what I think are like the strong melodies. I don't know if I'm going like too far with this one, but like what I think are like the strong melodies for like hook, verse, whatever, and it's all like I show my friends my demos, and it's just like there's like a beat, and it's just like and they're like, what is this? But in my head, I'm like, I know what's coming. Trust me, it's coming. And then I kind of like write the lyrics to those melodies. A lot of people do it the other way around, but usually that's how because I'm very like big on like pattern and groove, so I like to follow that. But yeah, that's how I do it.
That's interesting. I love that. My way is probably the opposite, because as I said, like I'm drawing from like my scrawlings and my lyrics. So I always tend to have like a concept in mind that will infer my chords and like where I'm going with the melody. And recently I've started writing with like a theme word. So that's given me like a springboard to, I guess, inspire me, because now I'm obviously a lot older than my high school years. Inspiration is getting less and less, and the sleep deprivation of having a 2-year-old. So I've joined an online songwriting club called I Heart Songwriting Club, and that's given me a topic which I have to write to, and that's really helped me, springboard my melody as well. So.
Yeah, and I was going to mention I Heart Songwriting. We might circle back round to that as well, so people can learn a little bit more about that. Yeah, Flewnt.
Yeah, like I guess my process can be always sort of ever changing and different many times. I probably got a main way I write, but and that's like I start with lyrics and I try to think about what the song, how it's going to impact those that actually listen, and I think my music's going to help. So like I'd write around whatever current sort of political topics might be happening in my community, or things that are relevant to that moment in time, and just how I'm really feeling as a cultural person. That inspires a lot of how I'll start writing. But also reimagining like classic songs that are from my people and community. I've done that process as well, where we've gone through and broken that down and then sort of found ways to sort of breathe life back into that. And I feel there's something special about that, because that's like that continuation of storytelling, which is so important as well. But yeah, the process, I guess, is generally lyrics first, writing to maybe like the real bare bones of what the beat could probably be, sort of figuring out the storyline, and then going back to the studio, building on it constantly with my producer, and then introducing like collaborators as well to sort of, I think like I love working with more than less people. I love the process of like heaps of ideas being thrown around and people adding to it. I think it creates more value in the song. I think people become invested in it, and even sometimes like that's got its pros and its cons, but I always seem to think that the more people that are invested in the track, the more life the track sort of has as well down the line. It kind of, more people are willing to push it back. It gets seen by different people, because they're like, look at what we've just been working on. And so I like always think that collaboration is a massive part of the way that I write as well.
So I think I start writing by just giving myself playtime. And I think people don't actually give themselves enough of just time to experiment, and often the pressure of going, I'm going to write a song or I'm going to write a track, for me personally, that results in like all of my worst ideas. So yeah, I like to give myself time to just experiment and play. And I think within that, focusing on a certain task or a certain, process in that can be useful. So sometimes I'll say like, I'm going to restrict myself to writing using only this amount of chords, or I'm going to write a piece using this style of drum beat, and that will be like my focus point. And I think some of the great advice I've had from other songwriters and collaborators and stuff is like restriction is key. So when you actually say these are the limitations, you can get so much more creative, because you don't have the option of just adding this and adding that and just adding more and more and more. And I think also beyond that one, once I have had a bit of time to play and I've kind of got something that I'm excited about, then collaborating is great, because also then you get new viewpoints on the music, and especially I work with a lot of feature vocalists, and then also coming with a concept or coming with like a couple of vocal rhythmic lines can be really helpful to then open up to other artists and experiment with them too. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to go into collaboration next. So a couple of you have touched on that, and just to hear about how your co-writing and collaborations, how they come about. Like, how did that idea get formed to collaborate with someone? How do you approach it? In the lead up and on the day, do you try and come in maybe with a part-written song and present some ideas? Because I imagine it could be quite fairly daunting and stressful at times as well. So, how do you get yourself in that space, and how do you make it all happen?
I'm sorry. Well, I've had I personally feel very nervous to do co-writes, but when I'm in there, I realise the other person is also feeling a bit of trepidation, and because you're kind of bearing your soul to the other person, you're showing them who you are, and the people that I've worked with in the past, I've just met them kind of on the day, and then you've got to be like, and this is what's in my soul, basically. So I found it really helpful to have some ideas already to bring to the table, so that I know, even though it can be a nerve-wracking thing, I can say, oh, well, I've got this idea, and then, you can kind of bounce off each other. And I found that to be really helpful, just to have something that, you can control when you're in there. And then you'll find out that, that will probably come out as something completely different, but at least you've got that initial spark of an idea.
And I think it also depends on maybe your relationship with the person before you go into the session. Like, I know when I'm working with friends, I already have some sort of rapport and common ground, and we're often excited about working on the track together. Towards the end of last year, I did a residency at Box Hill Institute in Melbourne, and I was working with 5 different vocalists that I'd never met before, and it was a studio session every day of the week. And so that was we didn't know anything about each other. And so I think the most important in those sorts of sessions is actually building some rapport and finding some common ground first before you actually start getting creative, because if you start it too early, you can kind of get resentful of the idea, or kind of be no, I don't actually believe in that, or that topic doesn't work for me. So I think actually chatting and trying to find some common ground is, friendship is actually really important in the collaboration process to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really important to have someone that actually understands, I guess, your vision as well. Because it's so easy to get in the studio and go, we're going to write a song. You write songs, I write songs, let's just do it. And you end up kind of clashing in a lot of ways. I'm someone that changes my mind a lot. And if I work with someone that's not really, I guess, used to that kind of energy of just being no, I changed that snare, changed the bass line, let's do this. The song's supposed to come out in 10 days. I'm no, we're gonna redo it again, like stuff like that. I think that's you gotta be able to find someone that just understands and also supports your vision, you support theirs. And there's no boundaries, because it's all just, it's creativity. So, yeah, I think that's really important. So the relationship comes.
Yeah, I totally agree. The foundation that a good collaboration we build on is the relationship, right? And like you said, belief in whatever it is that you're trying to achieve with the music. I think because I come from the hip hop background, collaboration is just really massive, always, constantly always working, doing features, and sort of how we build the scene that is kind of that is hip hop in itself. Because you think about hip hop groups and sort of the history of hip hop, there's you got Wu-Tang, which is a massive collaboration of all these artists. And even me, I'm a part of a crew called SBX, which is the pioneers of sort of hip hop in WA, and so it's kind of a part of the culture anyway, collaboration. So I'm quite lucky like that. But that's all based around relationships as well. So, yeah, that's quite interesting. I think a good sort of thing I could say as well, with collaboration. See, I work, my young son, he's 10 years old, and he makes music as well. And he's really quite good. And it's really interesting now seeing him start and the way that we collaborate, he and I as a father and son, on making his music as well. It's a pretty cool relationship because we know each other so well. It's really different. He will come up with similar to you, the melodies, and because he can sing and rap, and then I come through and just sort of fine tune what he does, and that's sort of a real different sort of collaboration, sort of that I've ever done with any other artist, because it's quite a close relationship. There's no tension around, oh, don't change this lyric or don't. So that's really cool. I think that the deeper and the better the relationship is, the more the song can benefit. And there's nothing more than a father and son, right? So that's quite interesting as well.
Yeah, I'd say everything's like in music is based on just relationships, really, right? Like whether it comes to making it or anything else. So yeah.
And what about, so you go into the writing to create something, and the whole experience is to create a song. How do you deal with the splits, the songwriting splits, which end up, those songs end up getting registered with APRA? It can be perhaps, the last thing you want to talk about and deal with at the time. But if you can fill us in on how you go about that, would be wonderful.
I think that's back on relationships again. If you're working with people that you're friends with, you can have those conversations. It's easy to just be like, hey man, listen, this is the vibes. This is what I'm expecting of this project. This is how I work. And they'll be like, okay, cool, I work like this. Can we do this? And if you guys are friends and if you guys, do, I guess, have a good relationship, you'll be able to sort that out. It's really hard. I've kind of learned this later on. Yeah, but it's really hard to talk about those things first, but it's something that as an artist you gotta just do. Because I know a lot of the times we don't want to talk about business, we just want to get in the studio and kind of like do it. Because it's fun, that's what we do, but I think you kind of have to be able to bring up those conversations in a very nice way, I would say, like a very chill way. But yeah.
Yeah, I think it's probably a case-by-case basis as well. It depends maybe on the situation, but I think like if I'm working in the studio and me and the artist that I'm working with are both spending the same amount of time in the studio, it's kind of like equal splits really, because it's about the time you're putting in. And like, sure, you could probably argue over like, I did that bass line, you didn't do this. But like, I think like when it comes down to it, you're both spending the same amount of time there. But I've definitely worked with some artists, especially when I've like maybe my management team or whoever's we're working with is speaking with like their team, and they won't even get in the studio unless they've agreed upon equal splits prior. So I think everyone works differently, but I think having the conversation sooner rather than later definitely like stops any of that awkwardness that can come up, and also like that can totally ruin collaborative relationships in some ways. So yeah, having open communication is key, and probably keeping some sort of like a record of that communication is probably useful as well.
I agree. I think because I've come from kind of just doing co-writing, so everything is generally, we'll just split equally. That's how I've done it. And the first time I went to Nashville, I didn't know how it worked, and I was like, oh, what do I do? I'm working with this amazing, like, Grammy-nominated artist. Do I pay her? I don't know. She was like, oh, no, it's 50-50, okay? And I was like, okay, phew. Like, so she schooled me when I first started, and that's just how I've done it. But I'm coming from a, folk singer-songwriter background where there's just generally two of us in the room, so it's easy to go, okay, 50-50, and go from there. But I imagine it does get a bit more complex when you're dealing with a band and producer, etc. So yeah, it just depends about what style and obviously your relationship with the person, as these people have said. So yeah, it can get dicey. I think open communication from the start is always good.
Yeah, because I've also heard stories where I think a collaboration is, I guess, you have to think of the future more, where it's like, let's say I'm getting on a song with Drake, and Drake is like, I want 80%. I'm like, hey man, look, it's your Drake. Like it's fine. So it depends what it is, what it's worth to you, and what you think they can bring to the song. Sometimes it's not just about, I guess, like the actual funds or the money, but it might be about building your catalog or your brand, and you got to be aware of that. It's not, yeah. So
yeah, there's many factors to consider, and like more and more come up the more you collaborate. Yeah, but my process was always sort of just 50-50 at the start when I was working with just me and a producer. But it gets more interesting. But I think probably the main thing that I heard that I think is really important is talking about it kind of straight away. Yeah. Especially if they're not like someone with the closest relationship. You probably want to get that out of the way straight away and talk about it. You might be able to get away with it somebody you work with your whole life later on down the track because you're close anyway and you'd sit down and negotiate it good. But I reckon, having a yarn straight away, figuring it out together, and then going in. But it changes during the process, right? Because if it depends on what you've negotiated at the start. So if you go through the process and they start doing a whole lot more on the track, then you should probably morally say the right way is like, okay, you've probably earned a bit more on this track or whatever. Unless you've already decided from the start you're going 50-50 no matter what. It all depends on what you negotiate at the start.
And what about, songs that have done well for you, have they been the ones that you've expected that to happen?